What is up, fight fans? It is 2 o'clock in the Mile High, so you know what that means. It is time for the MMA plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. You can give me a follow along online on Instagram and Threads at Comments from the Peanut Gallery, TikTok at the Peanut Gallery MMA. Got my man Danny Bailey behind the boards with me as always this week. We are coming to you live from the number 38 presented to you by Volo. Volo is one of those tremendous organizations that offers all things out there for your adult recreational needs. You want to go play some dodgeball, some softball, some flag football, whatever out there that you could possibly imagine, Volo is the spot to check out. Also, there are going to be a lot of big games for the winter sports schedule that are coming out for the Nuggets as well as the Avalanche as they approach the back half of their regular season and encroach the postseason and the playoff opportunities. Come down to the number 38. Check out some of the watch parties and the events that are going on down here. There is ample TVs, plenty of great things on the menu to eat, stuff on tap galore. You could also pick up some Mile High Sports merchandise on demand. There's a machine right as you walk through the door on the right-hand side to be able to pick up that gear at any point in time. Make sure that you show them some love. Check them out anywhere across the board. Smash that like, share, and subscribe button for the Mile High Sports crew. Giving you a rundown in the last week of Colorado sports. The Broncos lost in the AFC Championship. Now, I think I speak for all of Broncos country when I say this. Why don't you kick the goddamn field goal? You have a backup quarterback. You can't run the ball. Play action is not going to get respected when you have zero push with the ground game. Your defense is playing lights out so far. You've only allowed 12 total yards on 12 plays. There's a massive snowstorm coming in the second half. Why don't you just take the freaking points? That's a question that I think has echoed across all of Broncos country over the last few days, and I'll continue to beat that dead horse. In the hockey world, you have the Avalanche still holding it down with the best record in the NHL. They're a 9-point leader in the standings right now. Tremendous pace so far through the season. In the NBA, you have the Nuggets at a 31-16 clip. They're the number 3 team in the Western Conference, holding it down still. They have all these costly injuries, but still able to stay afloat and be able to maintain their position within the conference and within that division. So it's great news for them being able to continue to win games despite those missing faces in the lineup as they get closer to All-Star weekend here coming up. And then in the baseball world, you have pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training here in a couple of weeks. We've also had some announcements as far as the World Baseball Classic that's going down in just over a month. Check out the Mile High Sports crew wherever it is possible. Make sure that you smash those like, share, and subscribe buttons out there across the board. Now, moving along into the Colorado rundown. In the Colorado scene, we've got a couple of shows here in the next couple of weeks. You have Sparta with a double show on the 30th and the 31st. Going to be some fun matchups on a couple of those cards. Show them some love out there. Then you have on the 7th, you have the annual Grapple Bowl for CJJC, Colorado Jiu-Jitsu Club. It's going to be a great show of some of the high-level elite grapplers here on the Colorado scene. That's an annual event that we've had a pretty good turnout and pretty good success for. So that is one to check out on Saturday, the 7th, over at the Stampede. And then the next day, you have Colorado Combat Club 28 going down at the Stampede as well. That is going to be on February 8th. Guys, that's going to be a show with a lot of entertaining matchups. I understand that it is on Super Bowl Sunday, but we'll have you out of there before the game starts. And as far as some of the fighters and the quality that you're going to get from that card, it's going to be something that is really top choice as far as what we can have here on the local scene. It was originally scheduled to be a week earlier. Some issues as far as commission staffing goes made the card have to be pushed, and then venue availability made it have to be Sunday. That is why that ends up being the time slot. But again, I highly encourage you to come out and check us out at the Stampede, or at the minimum, hit up that pay-per-view, hit up the stream, support us from afar. If you're at your Super Bowl parties, you're traveling, you're tailgating, you're doing whatever for the game, totally understand. Totally get it. Hopefully you think of us and you throw on that stream in the process there. You can check out all of those options, whether it's tickets or the pay-per-view at purplebass.com/CCC28. We appreciate your support there. Now, real quick, also want to hit on this just before we get into the weekend recap and the weekend preview. It's somewhat of a preview, but it's combat sports adjacent, sports entertainment, if you will. This weekend, ladies and gentlemen, is the Royal Rumble. You have the Royal Rumble going down over in Riyadh, so it's going to look a little bit different than some events that you're typically accustomed to seeing, especially when it comes to the Women's Royal Rumble or any of their matches on the card. They're all going to be in full bodysuits. So in its own way, that sucks. That's part of the worst part of it being over in Riyadh. But if we're talking about the men's main event, which is obviously it's one of the big four premium live events that the WWE puts on per year, there is some massive star power that's already been announced that it's going to be in it. There's also the rumors of a couple of returns, and it's something that is always a spectacle of an event. You know, it's 30 people enter, one man wins. Every 2 minutes, there's a fresh new opponent that comes out. We have seen some crazy returns or pop culture entries throughout the years. You know, last year you had ISHO Speed. He got speared into oblivion by Braun Breaker. I think this year we can potentially predict that there's going to be a return from Y2J. Hopefully so, you know, cross that that they also licensed Judas by Fozzy. I think that we're highly likely to see Roman Reigns probably win, but also just announced today, you have Brock Lesnar going to be back into the Royal Rumble. This was just announced earlier this morning, like I say, and there is the potential storyline that rather than the angle that you go, you know, maybe Seth and, or excuse me, whether you go Roman Reigns and Punk or whoever for the belt at Mania, you have the potential of setting up Brock Lesnar against Drew McIntyre. So that could be a pretty enticing situation that you have there. What do you guys think? If you follow along there, I know that this isn't all of your cup of tea talking about WWE, but I love it. So let me know what you guys think. Moving along to the weekend recap for UFC 324. What a way to start off the Paramount era. I mean, if you had to ask me to give this card a grade, even despite some of the last minute fall offs and situations that happened coming into Saturday night, I still give this card an A. They hit it out of the freaking park for this one to start this Paramount era. Starting at the top, you have a crazy war between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett. Was it the most technical fight? Hell no. Not even close. But was it entertaining? 100%. I guess Scousers don't get knocked out. You know, Paddy got battered. He got bloodied. His face did not look anywhere near what it looked like when he entered the cage, which to that quote, Paddy said that he would leave with his face looking exactly the same. Well, Justin Gaethje went and proved otherwise. I think that Paddy won one of the 5 rounds. I thought that 49-46 was an accurate scorecard, but you could potentially make an argument for a 48-47, one way or the other. 3 very clearly defined rounds for Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje, now a 2-time interim lightweight champion. That sets himself up with some tremendous options going forward. We're going to talk a little bit more about one of those later on in the program, but naturally, whenever Ilya is available, there's that Ilya fight that's there. You know, you could have him and Ilya at the White House. You can have a potential, depending on when Ilya is back, there's maybe the winner of the BMF fight with Charles and Max, which he would love to get both of those losses back. It's an interesting situation at the top of the division at 155 pounds with Justin Gaethje being the interim champion there. When you have the next 3 being Arman, Charles, and Max. Like, what a crazy elite level of talent within those top ranks at 155. Though I will say that that was probably the most ruthlessly aggressive and uncontrolled, or at times almost, and it's going to come off in a disrespectful fashion, but at times kind of a sloppy fight from Justin Gaethje, just going out there, putting the foot on the gas, throwing 100% into absolutely everything. That's not the fight that he's going to have to fight against a guy like Ilya. If you go out there and you're that reckless against somebody like Ilya Topuria, it's going to be a bad night. Things are not going to go your way. But I think that Justin also recognized or realized that so long as he didn't get clipped with that crazy, unfortunate timing type of shot, he didn't really have to worry about the fire that Patty was going to bring on the feet. I don't think that he respected Patty's power from the very initial exchange. So he just said, screw it. I'm going to walk him down. I'm going to march forward. I'm going to swing everything, including the kitchen sink, into absolutely everything. And hopefully one of these puts him down. Maybe if he stays a little bit more measured and is a little bit more crisp and calculated with some of his combinations and his attacks, maybe he finds a finishing shot. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe it stays the exact same and they duke it out for a full 25. Absolutely something that's hard to forecast, hard to predict, hard to tell. One thing that I will say, though, from the outside looking in, Justin Gaethje is as tough as it gets. But you can't be that reckless against somebody who is that much of a sniper with level 10 FU type of power the way that Ilya Topuria has. On the flip side, you could make the argument that as far as somebody who's willing to stand in the pocket, bang, Ilya might not have fought somebody that brings what Justin brings to the table yet. Yes, he's fought both Max and Charles, who both beat Justin, but styles make fights, right? It would absolutely be interesting to see how that unfolds, though it would have to be a strategically different approach from Justin Gaethje's side of things. In the co-main event, you had Sugar Sean O'Malley taking on Yadong Song. I thought that this was a great performance by Sean. I thought that this was a fight that Sean needed to go in there and he needed to have a big bounce back type of victory to A, get himself back in the win column after a couple of losses, but B, get some of that swagger back, get some of the confidence back in him believing that all it takes is a right hand from Sugarland to go out there and finish a fight. To have the movement that he did against somebody who is as good as Song is, and being able to evade spending so much time on the ground, being able to stay away from having Yadong Song implement his wrestling or start to get to some ground and pound sequences. I think that that was a very solid win against a top rising contender in Song Yadong. Now, like 55, that also puts the top of 35 in a very peculiar position. As the rankings unfold, champion through 3, you obviously have Petr Yan, who has the win recently over Merab Dvalishvili at the end of 2025, the very last pay-per-view card in December. Merab being the number 1 contender. They're 1-1 against each other. There is that potential rematch for a trilogy fight that is out there. Based off of how the fight in December went, I don't know if the dominance from Yan earns Merab another title shot right away, or if you're the UFC, do you play the angle that Merab, that was his 4th title defense within a year, he was on a generational run as a bantamweight champion, so on and so forth. You just chalk it up to the activity playing a factor in performance. Who knows? Then you have sitting at 2, Umar Nurmagomedov, which we're going to talk a little bit more about Umar's fight here in a couple of the matchups on the card. But Umar is the only one that Yan has not fought yet. But I'm also less sold on Umar after last Saturday than I was going into it. Then at number 3, you have Sean. Sean has a win over Petr Yan. Sean being a mainstream level star, maybe not all the numbers completely translate, but his appeal to the mainstream or to the masses is certainly some of the highest that the division has to offer. Does Petr Yan decide, well, I want to get this win back against somebody who is a high-profile name like Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, there's options at 135 is basically what it comes down to for what I'm trying to say. Moving along from that fight, you have what was a heartbreaker for a lot of the fans. You had Derek Lewis getting TKO'd against Waldo Cortez Acosta. The finishing sequence was almost Anderson Silva, Forrest Griffin-esque. I did not think that the speed and athleticism of Waldo was going to be that much of a factor. And boy, was I wrong. He was just at every step of the way so much faster than Derek Lewis. And yeah, I get Derek Lewis is older. He's on the back nine and he sees the 19th hole on the horizon. I get it. But I just didn't think that the agility, the swift sleight of hand, the way that Waldo Cortez Acosta had in that matchup to where Derek Lewis really couldn't even start to get anything going at all. I didn't think that that was going to be the case. I didn't think that that would be how that played out. Credit to Waldo Cortez Acosta because he's a rising contender in a heavyweight division that desperately needs somebody to come in and start taking charge toward that top of the division, top of the rankings. That's a big name that he goes and knocks out. The next fight beyond that, you had a highly contested or a highly debated unanimous decision between Natalia Silva and Rose Namajunas. A couple of eye pokes in the process, a couple of them that didn't even get called out. Rose has had to have surgery already for the eyes. Based on those pokes, she had a cut that I don't remember the exact diagnosis, but basically the nail cut into the eyelid and damaged one of the tear ducts, as I believe the report said, and she's going to have a tube in her eye to help clear drainage for the next couple of months. So that's never good news when you hear that. That's the side of fighting that a lot of times fans don't see, especially once they get out and they're from beyond the cage. Natalia Silva, though, is a very talented fighter. This was a close back-and-forth matchup that, in my opinion, I'm not mad at them calling it 29-28 one direction or the other. Did I personally think that Rose had some advantage in the fight? Sure. But I also believe that based off of just some of the little general scoring or activity-based movements that judges at times favor, well, there's the case that Natalia had advantage as well. I think, unfortunately for Rose, in a couple of her more notable losses, it's not necessarily due to what her opponent did. It's more of what Rose didn't do. I think that had she had a little bit more activity, had she had a little bit more offense in a couple of sequences, that would have been enough to get her over the hump. They referenced the Sparza fight being one of the worst fights ever on the broadcast. Well, yeah, they're not wrong. And part of why it was that was because of the inactivity. A couple of scoring sequences would have been all the difference in the world for her to have won that rematch against Esparza. And I believe that would have been all the difference to get the win against Silva on Saturday. But neither here nor there, as that did not happen. The next matchup, you had a dogfight between John Silva and Arnold Allen. There was at one point that John Silva went into just such a crazy flow state of offensive attacks. He goes spin and elbow to boxing combination into a flying knee. I think there was a kick thrown in the mix also. Just his fluidity and him just walking Allen down at times. Like, man, he's fun to watch. Arnold Allen, though, is as tough as an old leather boot. I thought that was a tremendous showing for him being back after a year and a half of inactivity in the process. What's next for Arnold Allen? You know, that puts him losing the last 3 out of 4, although 3 of those 4 are to very reputable names, he's probably going to have to fight another guy who is rising in the ranks again to potentially defend his spot. You had John Silva jump four slots in the rankings. He went from 10 to 6. Put some interesting things out there for how these next couple of months are going to be matched at 145, especially given that we have a title fight in the featherweight division this weekend. Next fight that we're going to talk about is Umar Nurmagomedov taking on Davison Figueiredo. Guys, I'm less sold on Umar than I was going into the fight. Umar had some crazy odds in his favor, which whatever. I don't really care about the gambling side of things anymore at this point. There's obviously the gambling irregularity, whatever, blah, 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 that popped up that canceled the bout off of the card. Don't need to really get into the thick of that. But yeah, I just think it was an underwhelming performance by Umar. I think that Umar used to be that guy who showed some crazy flash with some of his kickboxing that blended into his wrestling. And now, like, I don't know. Like, I just don't. He's a really good fighter. Don't get me wrong. Like, he is legitimately a top ranked guy at 135. But do I see him as champion? I don't know. I'll circle back to it. I don't think that he has what it takes to get past a Piotr Jan or a Murad Dvalishvili. He obviously puts himself in contention for another title shot potentially against Jan this time. Obviously had the title shot against Murad that he lost. I don't know. I'm not in love with that thought. But you also have some exciting matchups if you were to run Sean against Corey. I believe that's 3 against 4. Put that at the White House, maybe. That would be a fun fight. You could run Sean and Umar if you do a rematch and do the trilogy fight with Merab and Jan. There's options that are there. But again, just to the original point, I'm just not sold on Umar Nurmagomedov being the guy at 135. Let me know what you guys think. Hit me up on the comments or hit my inbox, comments from the Peanut Gallery on Instagram and Threads, or the Peanut Gallery MMA on Instagram. Would love to hear what you guys think there. The next fight, there's some people that were saying this was a fraud check with Ateba Gautier taking on Andre Pulaev. A little bit. You could say, I mean, I can understand where people are saying that to a certain extent. He does have crazy power and crazy pop in his hands. But when you see him get past that first round, this is the first time in his UFC run that he's gone the decision, the first time in his UFC run that he's had to go outside of the first round, for that matter. If you don't put somebody out and all you throw is heavy bombs, you might find yourself in a little bit of trouble later on in the fight. In this particular matchup, Pulaev was able to withstand the storm. I mean, he got hurt multiple times early on in the fight, dropped a few times at that, but was able to keep on getting back up and eventually started to find a little bit of rhythm and flow toward the end of the second and into the third round. As Gautier continues to climb through the middleweight division, there's now a bit of a blueprint on him. He's not exactly in the same ballpark as where you could made the case where Francis Ngannou was in 2018 after that UFC 220 fight against Stipe. But it's kind of in that same realm that if you outlast the power, if you can get him tired and grind him out a little bit, you have a path to victory. He didn't really have an answer technically for some of the body kicks, for some of the work to the lead leg. He was getting chopped away, and he was just having water put into the basement. I think that there are going to be some more willing matchups now. He came in to this fight basically a Terminator. He was a boogeyman. He was the juggernaut who was blitzing through everybody that he had fought to that stage. But again, now that he had to go the full 15, you started to see some holes in his game. You started to see some opportunities to where you could potentially go advance and implement your game plan on route to a victory. I'm interested to see what's next for Ateba Gautier. Another couple of matchups just to talk about real quick before we head on to the next segment. You had Nikita Krylov get the late third round TKO victory over Modestas Bukauskas. Bukauskas started off as a sprinter. He was a front runner that was looking really good in the very beginning. I mean, for basically 3/4 of the first round, it was all Modestas. But when he was walking down Krylov, trying to find a finish, because Krylov was hurt early on. Let's clear the air there. Krylov being just a gritty veteran of so many fights, 20 plus fights in the UFC, he found his timing on a counter shot. And that counter that he was able to clip Bukauskas with, Bukauskas never completely recovered to form. And ultimately, Krylov was able to find his third round TKO at the very end. I mean, it was one of those buzzer beaters. You had a few buzzer beaters on that card. That was one of them. The next fight, you had a first round TKO from Alex Perez over Charles Energy Johnson. I love that win for Alex. Huge win for Alex. You know, he was basically kind of at a crossroads with his career as well, was coming off of loss, few injuries in the process. He is getting a little bit older now, in his 30s as a flyweight. That doesn't always bode well in terms of where Father Time has you sitting. But to go out there and to have a big knockout victory like that on a big card, man, love you, brother. Congratulations for that big win. And then you had Josh Hokett with an incredible performance against Denzel Freeman. Denzel Freeman, hey, he laid an egg. That was one of the worst performances that we've seen from anybody on any card in history. Did not throw a single strike while getting his ass whooped for 4 minutes and 50 plus seconds of that fight. The U.S. Greco team member, the former Marine Corps veteran, he got ragdolled and battered and bloodied from pillar to post. Hokett comes out right away, lands a double leg takedown, works through some damaging sequences. Back on the feet, just batters him around, combination after combination. Is at one point on his back, riding him, literally spanking him. I mean, he's Happy Gilmore riding the bull. They're even talking about it on the broadcast. He's spanking him. All the way to the point of humiliation to Freeman, where he flips him the bird as Freeman basically falls in his feet because he's so dog tired and can't continue forward. Goes out there then and cuts a crazy post-fight promo inside of the octagon. Has a wild press conference in the back where he used one of his cornermen or one of his camp people to help assist in the process, almost like Jimmy Hart level manager back in the day of pro wrestling. And then his subsequent interviews this last week that he's done since the fight. Guys, I told you, the heavyweight division is starved for attention. They are starved for guys who are going to be willing to put the spotlight on themselves and say, hey, look at me. I'm a problem. I'm somebody to deal with here. And, oh, yeah, who's he been calling out? Well, the last guy that we spoke about in the heavyweight division who was starting to make a rise and bubble for himself, Waldo Cortez Acosta. You can say some of his call-outs or his jokes or his anecdotes, whatever, are maybe untasteful or too far and across the line if you're asking people like Ariel Helwani. But at the same time, this is fighting. There's not really any lines when it comes to fight promotion. You're going to go in there and you're going to be half naked in front of the world, throwing bones, trying to knock the other person unconscious. There's not really any lines when it comes to fight promotion. You've got to be the one to go in there and stand on those words. And then opening up the night, you had Ty, the Thriller Miller, taking on Adam Fugit. Now, this was a knockout that happened at the very end of the first round. Man, I told you guys last week that from the time when that kid was 20 years old, when he fought for my show on Colorado Combat Club as an amateur, I knew that this kid had some sauce and that he was going to do some special things out here in the fight game. I knew it back then. And he's proven me right every step along the way. He goes out there and looks sensational in his UFC debut, picking up that knockout victory in the first round, earns a performance bonus. So tacks on an additional 100K to his fight purse. What a debut from this young man out of Albuquerque. Ty Miller, that's a name to remember at welterweight, ladies and gentlemen. Moving along to the next segment, we're going to go down under. It's going to be in Sydney, Australia this weekend for UFC 325. This weekend in the main event, you have a featherweight title bout, which is a rematch from a Fight of the Year contender last year, and Alexander Volkanovski taking on Diego Lopez. It's a fun fight from an entertainment perspective. There's a lot of people who say that, yeah, Diego didn't deserve the title fight. Well, that's a discussion that is way past us now at this point. They're fighting. That's the matchup that's going down in the main event when they get locked in at the Octagon on Saturday. I think that Volk could very well get the job done once again. I mean, I think it's probable, but at the same time, Diego brings the fight in every single matchup that he takes to the Octagon, and he has the power to be able to shut the lights out. It's not like Volk hasn't been finished before. And as much as I love Volk, Father Time is no longer on his side. Where he's at age-wise, every defense decreases that predictability score as far as a win. Every single fight that dwindles and dwindles. Or if you're talking about, like, if you guys play the UFC 5 game where it has your longevity bar, well, every fight is significantly decreased at this stage of where he's at within his career. It's not to say that he's not one of the greatest to ever do it, but Father Time is undefeated. Is this the time where we see Diego Lopez go out there and take the glory from arguably the divisional GOAT? I mean, if you were to say at 145 pounds, who are the greatest of all time? Well, there's always going to be the case that everybody makes for Aldo, as they should. Then you follow that up with Max Holloway in the discussion. Well, who's undefeated against both of them? Alexander Volkanovski. Volkanovski goes out there and has another win over Diego Lopez. I don't know what it necessarily does for him from a legacy perspective, given that there is all the speculation of, well, did Diego really deserve the title fight? There's still Mosfar and Lerone that are sitting out there. I couldn't tell you. If he goes out there and has another classic banger, well, that just goes to show that it doesn't matter who it is or what their ranking is on any given night. He believes that as the champion, he can go out there and beat absolutely anybody. In the co-main event, you have a fan-friendly matchup between Dan Hooker and Benoit Saint-Denis. I think that this is a dangerous matchup for Hooker, for sure. Given the power and the pop that Benoit has, and Benoit having the grappling in the arsenal. But I also think that Dan Hooker on any given night, that's a live dog, especially if you're talking about just going to war. He could very well be able to finish the job against someone like Saint-Denis. It's not like we haven't seen Saint-Denis get the break speed off of him before. That happened over in Fight Island, I believe that card was, early on in his UFC run. We saw him get knocked out by Dustin. We saw him get the work put on him by Renato Moicano over in France in front of his own country. Dan Hooker, another guy, though, who, yeah, he's getting toward that Father Time cliff, if you will, for where he's at as far as age and miles on the body, miles within his career. But also on any given night, that's going to be a dog who's going to go out there and fight until his last breath. Hey, from a fan's perspective, I love this matchup. Let's see what Dan Hooker can go do. You have another fan-friendly Strikers Delight matchup that's going down in the feature bout. You have Rafael Fiziev taking on Mauricio Hufi. How much will Hufi not have in his fight nerds brethren in his corner impact him? We'll have to see. You know, him not having some of those guys, you know, his main coach, I believe Pablo, well, he was there with Silva last week in Vegas. He has a baby, and then he's there helping prepare Kaio for Kaio's upcoming bout. How does him not being there and in the mix impact Hoofy? Be interesting to see. Hoofy said that he's been training a lot with Volk and working with those guys as far as his game planning and his camp work. But you have somebody who is well versed to elite level striking in Rafael Fiziev. I don't think that this is going to be a matchup where you see Hoofy go out there and have some crazy highlight reel finish. Naturally, I could always be wrong, because he just has that sort of crazy fluidity, creativity, dynamic athleticism for the division. He's a long and lanky striker. But you have Fiziev, who is one of the top Muay Thai guys that the UFC has ever seen. The way that he can enter the matrix and bend the way out of strikes. We've seen him fall to very few guys throughout the history of his UFC run. I think he's going to be a little bit more compact, a little more in the pocket, and he's just going to chip away and chip away and chip away at Hoofy until he's able to find his routes to just frustrate Hoofy and probably gets the job done there. That all to be said, you could also have something crazy and dynamic happen for Mauricio. That's why they fight the fight. Next bout, you have the return of Tai Tuivasa taking on Alisson Teixeira. It's a dangerous matchup for Tai to come back to. He's coming back against a literal Brazilian giant who's coming into the fight at 8-1. Tai's been away for a little bit of time, getting his brain and his body back right. He said in an interview that he still has a great fire and a great passion for fighting, but he needed to take a step away for a little while after the activity that he had, after taking that lost streak, that he needed to be removed to get to the point to where he missed it again. Said, like, there's always going to be the fighter in him, but he needed to miss it again. He needed to miss making that walk. He needed to miss hitting the curtain and smelling the smells of the arena, because it is something that's unique that you only get in that sort of stage. He needed to get to the point to where he missed things again in order to really have that fire to want to go out there and do what he does best. I hope that we see Tai Tuivasa get a win on Saturday. I hope that that's the case from a fan's perspective. Again, like, strip away all my professional credentials, merits, accolades, things that I've done, so on and so forth. I started on this path in the first place because I was a fan first. From a fan's perspective, I want to see Tai Tuivasa win. I want to see him out there in his hometown of Sydney, get up on the cage and grab somebody's dirty ass shoe, pour a beer in it, and chug it down. I want to see that happen. When Tai Tuivasa is winning fights, it is a much happier heavyweight division in the process. It's a funner place in the octagon. If we can get him back on a run and winning fights again, man, that's a dude who is fun to watch, period. Because Bam Bam goes for it. Plain and simple. Another couple to run through here. You have Quillen Salkid. Hey, he's taking on Jamie Malarkey. Jamie Malarkey being a fill-in over the last few weeks. I think that last year's rookie of the year for us, I think Quillen, he goes out there and he probably has another highlight reel knockout here. All due respect to Jamie Malarkey, but again, it's one of those conversations of somebody who is now aging, who has had the lights put out in a highlight reel fashion, I believe in the last, I want to say it's the last 2 out of 3 fights, something in that range, against a guy who has meme level knockouts whether it's by punch or by kick in 2025, I think that you just see a matchup that goes solely in his favor. And then the last matchup, we'll go with another couple here. One of the last matchups that we're going to talk about, you have a prelim bout between Billy Elikana taking on Junior Tafa. Probably going to see a bit of a kickboxing matchup. You know, the Tafas, warm milk. You're not going to get anything too crazy out of him. You're going to see maybe a knockout here or there, but you know his record reflects at 6-4. We'll see how it goes in the process. You have Cam Rouston, who's taken on our friend of the program, Cody Brundage. Cam Rouston is speaking very highly of himself coming into this fight, and I think he might be overlooking Cody. I get Cody's had some adversity throughout his career where it may add some detractors on his side, but also when you look past that, Cody's got a lot of great attributes to him. He's a good college level wrestler who has power in his hands, solid submission skills, athleticism with his feet, and he's very fluid within his hips. He brings a great deal of athleticism to the 185-pound division, and he's also got a lot of dog in him too. Again, people will discredit that. They will be naysayers like, oh, are you going to say you're going to hogwash? You watch a couple of those fights from last year, especially the one where they were up for, or he was up for comeback fighter of the year or comeback fight of the year against Julian Marquez. You're going to say that, oh, he just goes and finds an easy way? Not a chance. He's going to keep on scrapping, and he's going to go out there and do absolutely everything that he can to get his hand raised on Saturday. And he could very well do this in an exciting fashion. You got Blonde Brundage hitting the cage. Hammer that for me. Then you have Jacob Malkoun taking on Therese Finney. I think that Therese Finney finally gets that 0 snatch from his record. Yeah, he's 11-0, but I just don't think that he's that good, especially in comparison to a guy like Jacob Malkoun, who is well-versed. I think that you'll see Malkoun go out there and smother him and be able to get his hand raised in victory. Then you have the Welsh gangster, Oban Elliott. He's making his return against Jonathan Mekalov. Now, this might favor the Australian, but you know, Oban's another exciting fighter. You know, he's a welterweight who I don't think ever is going to have top tier contender status, but he's going to give you some fun fights. And then you also see the Road to UFC Championship Tournament round out. I think the most notable name that's going to be fighting on Saturday is you're going to see Aaron Toe. Aaron Toe notably fought against Luis Grillet on the Contender Series. He's the Maori guy with all the crazy face tattoos, if you remember that. So I think that that's probably going to be the most notable matchup that you see there on the on that Road to UFC show, or the Road to UFC tournament roundup, if you will. And now we're going to move along to Kurtzy's message of the week. Get up. Sometimes life's going to kick your ass and it's going to knock your dick in the dirt. Get up. You had a rough day at work. You got your heart broken. Your dog died. You got passed over on an opportunity that you thought that you earned. You were given some bad news. It sucks. And sometimes that pain is draining to the point where you feel like you're face down in the gutter about to get curb stomped. But you've got to get up. Remember, in life, all we can control is our attitude, our gratitude, and our effort. So when life gets you down, get up, thug it out, control the controllables, and let the rest of the chips fall where they may. That's Kurtzy's message of the week for you guys. And now, as we are about ready to wrap up the hour, we're going to go to the highly anticipated segment. As always, every single week, got my man Danny Bailey behind the boards. 3 rounds. First one. Yeah.
All right, Jordan. Arman Tsarukyan has been on quite the PR and media tour the last couple of weeks. What are your thoughts?
I think that this is the best thing that Arman could be doing for himself right now. He should have been doing this sooner, if we're being completely honest. but it's better late than never. As the kids say, he's doing side quests right now. But right now, if we're being 100% honest, side quests is really all that's on the table for Arman, since there's not really a main quest title fight opportunity that's there for him at 55. He competed at Real American Freestyle 5 in December. He's set to compete on the next RAF 6 at the end of February. He's done a couple of other grappling shows and events. He's made multiple different appearances at other fight cards, combat sports related events, some influencer cards. He's been doing a lot of podcasts. He's been going on live streams from some of the bigger names out there within the streamer space. To be honest, and self-admittedly, as a guy who just a couple of weeks ago wasn't really a big Arman fan, he's starting to win me over. He's starting to make me think, yeah, Arman is, he's a guy who you can potentially actually build some star power on. Now that he's doing some talking, he's getting out of his own way. We should definitely squash the talk on him going to 145 to challenge Volk, since he's been put on ice without that 155 title shot. He spoke about that the other day in an interview. He couldn't make weight for a title fight at 155 pounds. How the hell are we going to trust him to go down to 45 and do it? And he even spoke about it in his interview that he did with DC about how, he'll be better with the weight. He won't punch a fan. He won't headbutt somebody in the face-off anymore like he did Dan Hooker, where he broke Dan Hooker's nose just the day before they were supposed to fight, which could have canceled that fight for him too over in Qatar. All in all, right now, he is doing everything right that guys like Mosfar Avoyev and Lerone Murphy are doing wrong. Kudos to Arman right now in what he's doing with this PR run.
Conor McGregor just put out a training video saying that he's in camp. What's your reaction to the video and this alleged camp?
Now, I'm not sure if he's officially in training camp or he's just back in the lab routinely, and I'm going solely based off of timelines here. If he's actually in a traditional fight camp, then that means that he's probably not likely on the White House card, which in some ways it kind of makes sense. There's not going to be any sort of gate, limited sponsors, all of that, all blah, blah, blah. That card is roughly 19 weeks away. If we're talking, even a longer fight camp, a lot of times we're maybe talking 12 weeks. Well, there was at least a few sessions, which leads me to believe it's a couple weeks worth of content that they had been shooting at SBG with Conor. The timeline for the Miami card is just 12 weeks away. There hasn't been a headliner announced for that show. That doesn't mean that he might just be in the early stages of periodization for something that is more long-term going into June. But if it's a straight-on camp, well, that's a really long camp, and you might redline way too early. One thing that I will say from the footage that we've been released so far, he looks the most clear-headed and active on the mats that we've seen him be in years, along with looking more crisp and tactical beyond just his little pot shots. But what does that mean for a 37-year-old who has skied slopes pure as the driven snow and hasn't won more than one fight since the pandemic? Or better yet, has won just one fight in 9 years? Honestly, it doesn't mean much. But the optics show improvement, and that's as much as we can go on so far. It's an improvement. It gives us at least some hope that we get somewhat of a version of motivated McGregor back.
"42-year-old Cub Swanson returns in April for what could be his final send-off. What are your thoughts?"
It's an all gas, no brakes matchup against Nate the Train Landwehr. I'm here for it. And all of you fans should be too. I don't know if we'll see the full version of Killer Cub come out and go to war, or if we'll see him rely on some of his black belt expertise. But one way or the other, we know that Nate's going to bring the fight. And fans who are in attendance in Miami at UFC 327 on April 11th, you're in for a can't miss fight. Nate the Train also will always have one of the best and most relatable quotes as it relates to the fight game that anybody has ever delivered on a microphone, in an interview, on a podcast, wherever it may be. This fight life is like loving the neighborhood hoe. She ain't never gonna love you back. But just like that, folks, we are all out of time. We want to thank you all so much for tuning in with us each and every week for Original Combat Sports programming. Keep in mind that we do have some events coming up here on the local scene over the course of the next couple of weeks. On the 30th and the 31st, you have Sparta in action. On the 7th of February, as well as the 8th, you have Colorado Jiu-Jitsu Club, as well as Colorado Combat Club getting down. Again, guys, that's going to be a great opportunity to go out and see some of the local scene. You never know who is going to be the next guy from Colorado shows to go on to the big show and make a name for themselves. Just as we talked about earlier, Ty Miller fought here on a Colorado card when he was an amateur. He just went out there and had a performance of the night, bonus winning win in his UFC debut on one of the biggest cards to start this era. You never know who is going to be that next guy, especially in such a talent-rich area like Colorado. I want to say thank you to Danny Bailey holding it down for me each and every week behind the boards. Thank you to the Mile High Sports crew. Make sure that you smash that like, share, and subscribe button wherever it is possible. Come down here to the number 38, check out some games, grab some food, get a drink, whatever. If you want to hang out for a little while, pick up some merch in the vending machine. Great things here in Colorado all the way around. Great things from the Mile High Sports crew. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Give me that follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery on Instagram and Threads, as well as the Peanut Gallery MMA on TikTok. We'll see you back next week. Same time, same place. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.